This is how to make a blind hem alteration using hand sewing methods. First, you're going to make sure that the client has washed and dried the pants so that they have pre-shrunk. And then you're going to make sure that they are wearing any undergarments, belts, suspenders, and the shoes that they'll wear with the pants. Next, I like to pin to the ground, and then I can ask the client how far up the ground they would like the pants to be. You can just pin at the center back, or you can pin at the center back and the side seam. Either way is just fine. Please note that most people have one leg that is longer than the other, especially if they have anything like scoliosis or if they've had an injury. Make sure that you note if the client wants the pants shorter or longer than as you pinned to the floor. At the table, I like to make this little grid indicating the right side, the left side, side seam, and center back. First, I'm going to measure the left side seam and then the center back, and then you have the option to either use the higher number, lower number, or take an average. I'll be using the original number, and then I'm going to add 1/4 of an inch. We'll make it so that the pants are 1/4 inch shorter than the floor. On the right side, the two measurements were a little bit different. And note that the right and left legs are often different length, so it's totally normal and okay if the measurements are a little bit different. I've decided to make this total measurement 1 1/8, so I'm using the 7/8 measurement so that it's on the shorter side. And now you can unpin the safety pins because you've got everything marked up. And then I'm just going to show you a little bit of how this is constructed. These pants were hemmed using a blind hemmer machine. It's a very specific machine with a single needle that's like a curved hook. And we're going to be doing a little bit different method, but you can go ahead and unpick that thread. And as you are unpicking it, you will often find that there's a side that you can snag that makes it very easy to unpick. Often I don't find it quite at first, but then once you've got it, it's really satisfying. After you've taken the thread out of both sides of the pants, you can turn your pants inside out, and then you are going to fold up the pant the amount that it needs to be folded on the right and the left leg. Start with one leg and make sure that you've got the correct side, and place pins in the pant at the center front, center back, and both side seams up the desired amount for your new hem length. This is definitely a measure twice, cut once situation, so it doesn't hurt to go back in and measure and make sure that your sides are correct. And here's a quick view of me doing the other side of the pant. And after you've got both of those, you're going to go ahead and press the new turn of the cloth where your hem is going to be, making sure that if you have ball head pins that you are not pressing over the plastic part, as it will melt on your iron. After I've pressed it one way, I like to line up the side seams and then press it again. Usually there's a crease down the center front of a lot of blind hem pants, so you can kind of recreate that press. Complete the same step on the other side, and you're going to be totally removing the original crease hemline of the pant and creating the new one. Now I'm going to show you two different ways that you can mark the cut line on your pants. The first way is to keep the pants inside out and then measure down 1.5 inches from the new crease line, and this is going to be your cut line. I like to replicate what the original amount of seam allowance was above the turn of the cloth where the hem is and replicate that on the pant, although you can change it if necessary or if you're wanting to keep a little extra length. The other method that you can use in order to mark your hem placement that is sometimes easier for some people is keeping the fabric folded and then measuring up from the turn of the cloth where your new cut line is going to be. Either way is just fine. Next, I like to always keep my hems intact when I'm cutting them, meaning that I do not cut up vertically. I just pinch the fabric together to cut all the way around. This is helpful in case you have an accident. You can reattach this easily without having to mend a seam. And it's also something that I like to use to test out my serger or sewing machine before I actually start stitching on the actual garment. You're going to complete this onto both sides, and then you can head on over to a serger, or you can use a zigzag or any way that you like to finish a raw edge of your fabric. If your serger does not have the ability to remove this little plate so that you can stitch in the round, simply turn the pants right side out and then stitch around the garment as if it is a tube. Try to keep the seam flat when you are stitching over it, And then in order to complete the serge a little bit over about 1/2 inch from where you started, and then you can clip your thread. After everything has been serged, you're going to take a piece of thread that is a similar color to your pant, and if you have silamide or pre-treated thread, then you're all set. Otherwise, you can use beeswax or a thread conditioner like Thread Magic or Thread Heaven. Next, you're going to tie a knot on the end of your thread, and we're just going to be using a single thread. I usually only use a length of thread that goes from my center sternum, which is called the suprasternal notch, to the length of my hand. Anything longer than that gets a little bit difficult to work with. And then I'll be using that single thread, so one length of my thread will be a little bit shorter and the other will be longer. Next, you're going to hide your thread tail by going down underneath the fabric and making sure that that thread tail is skewered down. And then you're going to be coming up, and the first method that I'm going to be showing you is going to be something called a vertical hem stitch. I really love this stitch because your foot won't get caught in it. It looks really nice and it's fun to do. If you want, and if you like, you can put little dots of erasable or disappearing marker or pen. You can also use chalk if you'd like. If that matters to you, if you want to make sure that your stitches are really even, or you can just eyeball it. But you're going to take a small bite out of the thread that will go onto the outside of the fabric, making sure that you don't see the thread on the outside of the fabric. And then you will come down about 1/8 or 1/4 of an inch. I usually just do this right below where my serged edge is, and then you'll continue to do so. You can see that there's a little section here of my serging that came undone. I would want to go back in and fix that. However, if you're just trying to do something really fast, then you can continue to power through. So again, all you do is you take a small bite of the fabric and then you angle your needle down into the turn of the cloth, and then you'll come back up and it will start to create all of these diagonal lines. You'll continue to do this around the entirety of both of your hems, and if you need to, you might have to tie off a knot. I like to hide those knots underneath the fabric and start again if you run out of thread. Now I'm going to show you an alternative stitch that you can do as well. This is called a catch stitch or a cross stitch, and I have a little section that has not been serged here just for demonstration purposes. You would want to make sure that that edge was finished. But you're going to start by having treated thread, and then you're going to hide the knot underneath the fabric. And similar to the vertical stitch, you're going to take a bite out of the outer fabric, but instead of going down diagonally underneath the fabric, we're going to go over the fabric, and we're going to start to create these little V's. So I have little dots here as a reference. You don't have to do that, but you can if you would like, where I'm going to take a small bite of the fabric so that the thread does not show on the outside of the garment. And then I can take a full bite of the turn of the cloth on the hem, making sure that I only go through that single layer. And then I'm going to start to create these little mountains. You'll see that there's a little bit of the stitch that shows on the outside, but it shouldn't be much. And then you'll just continue this around the entirety of the garment. Again, there are so many different ways that you can do a hand blind stitch, but these are 2 ways that I really like to do. This is an example of taking too much thread. You could see the needle, and you could also see a lot of the fabric, or excuse me, the thread on that side. And so you want to make sure that you're taking smaller bites out so that you don't really see that. And then you'll just continue this all the way around. Finally, you are going to press all of the edges of your fabric, making sure that everything is smoothed out. You can press the creases back into the center front and the center back if you'd like to, and you will be all set. I hope this helped you learn or get better at doing blind hems and hand stitching, and I hope that you and or your client enjoy your newly hemmed pants.